Hey everybody. Yep, as you can see up there, I'm here to read off Dan Drazen's review of Sonic the Hedgehog 233 and Sonic Universe 37. So, I'll be quoting a lot of what he typed here. And, just gotta bear with me. Excuse me. Bear with me here. Alright. This is all Dan Drazen's wording, and many of you probably know who he is. So here we go. And I quote, he talked about the cover by Ben Bates. He says, a mind-addling swirl with Sonic and Antoine on one side of the scales of injustice and Jeffrey on the other, with Naugus looming large in the background. This might have worked fine, except that someone thought it wasn't enough. As a result, we also have the panel of judges, King Max, the ghost of Hershey and Kodos. The end result looks like an editorial cartoon on acid. Less definitely would have been more here. Less definitely would have been more here. All right, and this is, like I said, this is all written by Dan Drazen. I'll provide the link down below. The Trial of Jeffrey St. John, story by Ian Flynn, art Stephen Butler, ink Terry Austin, color Matt Herms, lettering John E. Workman, assistant editor Vincent Lovio, debut, excuse me, editor Paul Kaminsky, editor-in-chief Victor Golick, court reporter Mike Polithro, Sega licensing representatives Anthony Garcia, and Cindy Cho, whatever. All right, here we go. And this is all Dan Drazen's writing, or typing. And I quote, Sonic and Tails are in the mountains outside New Metropolis, checking out the ruins of the Babylon Rising story arc and possibly assessing whether they could be fixed up into a ski resort. Excuse me. A two-bird patrol shows up and is more concerned about the Armada's shame than getting off any weapons fire. If you ask me, the Armada's shame is hiring goofs like these who would make Imperial stormtroopers look like special ops snipers. But having taken up 3 pages with this, including a page of vanilla flashback to the events of 1 step forward and 2 steps back, 225, 230 respectively, we cut to the main course. The Tuluro, I can't pronounce it, the title, basically, trial. The Tuluro trial. It's people versus St. John, the less than honorable King Naugus presiding. Antoine as prosecutor, and Jeff begins grilling him. No, wait a minute. Antoine as prosecutor, and Jeffrey acting as his own lawyer. After Jeffrey pleads not guilty, Antoine begins grilling him. I'll spare you as much of the trial transcript as possible and hit the highlights. It seems that during the Great War, while he was still a young rookie, Jeffrey came across an Axis artifact which looks like a green jewel of some kind. Naugus uses it to worm his way into Jeff's Paichi and recruit him to his side. I guess he never read Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, where Mr. Weasley offers the sage advice, never trust anything that can think for itself if you can't see where it keeps its brain. Jeffrey uses Antoine's dad's training manuals to hone his skills after War Ministry Julian reinvents himself as Robotnik, while also taking training in the dark arts from Naugus via the artifact. There's been no mention of how he acquired his magical skill set. Rudimentarily, though it may be, rudimentally though it may be. So we've cleared that up. And he puts in bold print there, that. Excuse me. Jeffrey gets himself hired by the Secret Service and lands a co-starring role in the Princess Sally miniseries of years gone by. Jeffrey also mentions, without documentation or witness, that Max, King Max, had always sworn the crown to Nagus. Whatever you say, dude. After some furthering strolling down memory lane, including some bad rapping of Prince Elias, Antoine hits a nerve by implying that Jeffrey's marriage to Hershey was as much of a scam as pretty much everything else about him since he came across the artifact. In his defense, he mentions that he found her when he was at a low ebb, sounding like he adapted every episode of Behind the Music. She was my partner in life as well as in the field. We were married at gunpoint and somehow it felt right. As for her fate, something happened to her in the South America, which editorial helpfully explains is the Mobius South America. Now, is that the South America with the rainforest or the South America with the mountains? Man, that's like back in the bad old days when you said Africa and all you thought of were jungles and cannibals. Actually, it sounds more like an entry from the Jeff Foxworthy Redneck Dictionary. I got me the Coca-Cola franchise for Venezuela. That's in South America. Anyway, he testifies that she died while staying with the Fidela. Cause of death unknown. Body never recovered. I said a while ago that Archie owed the readers a damn good explanation of what happened to her. Guess what? They still do. And he puts in caps, still. But let's cut to the chase. Jeffrey claims that he's innocent of treason because Nagus is the rightful king based on what he heard a talking jewel say to him. The panel of judges chooses to define treason as pretending to serve the active authority while working against it. As such, they have no problem convicting him. And that's the cue for Nagus to drop the other boot. Using his prerogative as monarch, he issues a get-out-of-jail-free card for Jeffrey. It's good to be the king. Yeah. And now we're down to one more page. We see Eggman doing some further customizing. Excuse me, let me get some coffee here. That's better. And now we're down to one more page. So we see Eggman doing some further customizing of Mecha Sally, including equipping her with a power ring which he thinks will act as a firewall to prevent her regaining his... Okay, hold on. And now, I know I'm messing up here, folks, forgive me. And now we're down to one more page. So we see Eggman doing some further customizing of Mecha Sally, including equipping her with a power ring which he thinks will act as a firewall to prevent her regaining her free will, as well as have enough juice to smack Sonic's quills off. Not a good day for the home team. Alright, now remember what I said before when I read off his reviews? He does it by different categories. Head, boy, he's got a lot on the head part. Eye and heart. So this is his part on the head, and that's how he scores it. He scores it by head, eye, and heart. Alright, so this is his head score. I don't know what it is yet, because it's a long one, but this is what he talks about for the head. Head-wise. In Tom Wolfe's From Barriers to Our House, he states that contemporary music has become so abstract that the only way a university music department can host such a concert is to bookend it with cozy and familiar pieces by composers such as Scott Joplin and James P. Johnson. These pieces represent a piece of candy at the beginning and a piece of candy at the end. Whether Ian Flynn has read Tom Wolfe or not, his trial follows the same exact structure. That is, after all, a 16-pager with 12 of those pages devoted to characters talking at each other in a courtroom. That's pretty deadly stuff for a core audience that had been promised action and more action. So after the previous page, we get 2 pages of Sonic and Tails in a lopsided battle with a couple of bird brains, and 1 page at the end of Eggman being evil. Action, suspense, candy! Alright, continuing on with the said score. To give credit where it's due, the trial format itself is a good way to inject a crazy load of exploitation into the storyline, while merely slowing the pace to a crawl rather than bringing it to a screeching halt. But it still doesn't quite work. The biggest problem is the same one on display in the Inside Job arc, Sonic Universe 29 to 32, credible issues, I should say, whatever. Like I said, a link will be provided below. In Inside Job, we have to put up with the unsavory character in the person of Scourge, whose assessment of his lot in life is necessarily self-serving. Likewise, Jeffrey tells his side of the story, which of course isn't the whole story. For one thing, Ian has sidestepped any Mobian courtroom ritual, where the defendant promises to tell the truth. I don't know why Jeffrey couldn't be admonished that he isn't, that he's in, okay. I don't know why Jeffrey couldn't be admonished that he is standing in the presence of Aurora, or the Walkers, or some other authority figure, or even threatened with further punishment for committing simple perjury. Maybe editorial figured that would have been asking for trouble. Likewise, Antoine never gets a chance to cross-examine Jeffrey to challenge him on the veracity of any of his statements, some which beg to be challenged. The problem begins right out of the box with his tale about the artifact. First off, I've seen this movie before. The first Care Bears movie, to be exact. In it, a speaking book with a classical runic script sweet talks the boy, Nicholas, who becomes the foil for whatever evil spirit the book embodies. Then too, as the panel, I'll just put it like that, as the panel points out towards the end, Mobius already had a legitimate government in place. But Jeffrey would rather listen to a piece of talking costume jewelry. This reminds me of Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Well, Dennis, the Antichrist, tells King tells King Arthur, supreme executive power derives from a mandate from the masses, not from some foxural acritic ceremony. I suppose if Jeffrey had told anybody that Naugus was the true king of Mobius because an enchanted piece of bling had told him so, all he would have gotten for his trouble would have been a lot of funny looks and a one-way ticket to the closed ward. Yet Ian can't even let himself have a little fun with the absurdity inherent in the material. And it is unforgivable that Jeffrey pretty much skates over the question of Hershey's ultimate fate. She died? No, she died. Nothing about cause, no body to deal with, instant cold case. Yet another example of why I hate loose continuity. But if the trial itself is a joke in spots, it's left to Nagas himself to provide the punchline and to demonstrate that the royal fix is in. Jeffrey's conviction was never going to happen. Jeffrey's conviction was never going to happen. That ought to cause Nagas to drop some points in his approval rating. Honestly, after a certain point, I more or less tuned out the details of Jeffrey's testimony. It covered too much territory in too many continents. Or whatever. Or too many contents. Smart move as it turned out. The entire trial was rendered meaningless by Nagas' pardon. It's still a useful collection of one-sided information about the continuity, but looking back on it, this story didn't advance the continuity at all. This was an exercise in marking time. And I'm sorry, but South America, give me a break. Heart score from Dan Drazen, 4. And this is a guy that's friends with Ian Flynn on Facebook. So he gives the head score, he gives the head score 4. Alright, I score, which is art. Stephen Butler gets as much of a chance to flashback as to document the trial. And he does some nice facial progressions, especially as Jeffrey comes close to losing it after Antron pushes the Hershey button. I score 9. Heart score. If there's any kind of emotional core here, it's the Hershey interlude. I really wanted it to work too, but I guess it was doomed from the start. I've already discussed the fact that this was all Jeffrey's side of the story with no second opinions. That's fair. Someone, and he capitalized someone, gets to speak for Hershey in her absence, even if Jeffrey's dialogue is more than a little heavy-handed. Yet, Ian misses a chance to inject some real feeling into the situation other than Jeffrey snarling and gnashing his teeth at Antoine. It could have been done without making too much of a demand on the core audience. It would have only have taken more of a flashback to Jeffrey learning that something had happened, a flashback he wouldn't necessarily have shared with the court. I'm not talking TV-grade gore from the NCIS or CSI franchises. Just something beyond Jeffrey talking to it. Just something beyond Jeffrey's talking at us. Speaking of Jeffrey, Nagas playing on his emotions through the artifact does have an authentic feeling to it. That at least gives Jeffrey plausible motivation to do what he did. It just doesn't carry forward into the telling of Hershey's fate. And I really wish it had, because there's a certain absence of closure about the way it was handled. I don't know whether Ian plans to bring back Hershey or not. This is a comic book after all, and the medium is notorious for pulling these kinds of tricks. Heart score 5. So basically, overall, a score of 18 on the main story. And the backstory you can read when you click on the links. So, and that's mainly what I do. I read all off his review of the main story and allow you guys to do the review if you want to on your own. So, yeah. I let you, it's basically the backstory analyzes this situation. So, and the fan art and all that. So if you want to read his review on the backstory from the Shadows of issue 233, go ahead. I just gave you the main story. Let me get some coffee here for a second. All right. Now, let's talk about Sonic Universe 37. And this is his review on Sonic Universe 37. Alright. He mentions that the cover is Jamal Pepper's Jim Ash Matt Herm's cover, a rather impressive cover design based not on a well-known comic book, but on a well-known painting by Norman Rockwell. It's one of a series of 4, in fact, illustrating Franklin Roosevelt's 4 freedoms. Freedom from want, freedom from want in this case. Though you couldn't know it from this cover, Paul Kaminsky actually drops this spoiler in his Sonic Spin column. Here's the real deal, and he puts a Wikipedia website on there. The only turkey on the comic cover, however, is Robotnik himself. For the rest, it's totally bogus. It's totally bogus WRNT, the story inside. Sonic, Tails, and Bunny don't even appear in this issue, and nobody's going after Snively except for the Fat Man himself. Alright. Scramble, Part 1, The Man in Charge. Story, Ian Flynn. Art, Jamal Peppers. Ink, Jim Ash. Colors, Steve Downer. Lettering, Jack Moreland. Assistant Editor, Vince Lavolo. Editor, Paul Kaminsky. Editor-in-Chief, Victor Golick. The Droid You're Looking For, Mike Perithro. Sega Licensing Representative, Anthony Gauchio and Cindy Chow. Alright, and this is his review of it. It's not too long, thank God. But here we go. Let me get some coffee here. Alright. The death day, quote, and this is his words, this is Dan Drazen's, quote, the Death Egg goes on high alert. Unfortunately, the main egg is the last to hear about it. So what's the first thing he does when he finds himself locked out of the command system? He sends out for two comic minions, a pair of droids named Obot, and Cubot. The former is a spear with what I take to be a British accent a la C-3PO, or Wheatley from Portal 2. The latter is a cube whose speech is more down home, right down to the Hank Hill, I'll tell you what phrase he drops later on. And that's pretty much all you need to know about those two. Anybody that's read played Sonic Colors knows who they are too. We then get a page of Snively, the babbling villain, declaiming his bald head off for the benefit of the readers and to give himself something to say out loud other than the voice override commands he uses to get past security lockdown. Villains, they love to hear themselves talk. Meanwhile, Eggman is watching the CC of a video where Snively laments the demise of the Dark at the hands of Sonic and the disbanding of the Dark Legion units. That's not going to be good for business. So he gets the Egg SWAT scrambling to look for Snively. He's apprehended in the docking bay, but in the process of being delivered to the dock, he does that get ready for the surprise number from Total Recall and goes to pieces. So do a number of other decoy Snivelies around the ship. Well played, little man, the Dark concedes. The next order of business is to get his evil ducks back in a row by calling a meeting of the Legion Grand Masters. We then get 4 pages of the assembly of the Injustice Friends. Have your pencils and scorecards handy. Red Begador Rabbit, Great Desert, gets his calling while drafting a speech to the rest of his people. Drago Wolf and Razorclaw, Great Forest, are getting along about as well as you expect from a canine and feline. Lord Hood, Merced, wants to celebrate Eggman's demise by torturing some of the locals. Diesel, Efficlin Plains, is riding his Efficlin cycle and planning on sacking a village. Bill Platypus is drafting an incapacitation proclamation for the troops and looking forward to coming out of the closet as a freedom fighter. Raju Clan Bride Conquering Storm Dragon Kingdom is busy kicking the bat butt of a Yagyu ninja, so she may not have even gotten the memo Snively sent. Akalut, I can't pronounce some of these names. Frozen North Sea is rousing his rabble, but unlike Diesel, doesn't seem to have any objective in mind. Hugo Bass, Eurasia, just sits at his desk and looks badass. The foreman, somewhere underground, works on his imitation of the Underminer from the last scene of The Incredibles. You know, your leadership skills need improving if you disappear and your team doesn't even notice. And so at the Legion of Doom, sorry, I couldn't resist. Linda, HQ headquarters, wonders what kind of chicken outfit the Eggman is running when the big guy shows up on cue. When Drago asks what's going on here, Fatso starts by reminding them that he can blow any of them to kibble thanks to the explosive implants they all have. To quote Carome, "Sip boy." As Orb and Cube serve tea and cakes, Eggman seems to think that the Grandmaster shouldn't have simply taken Snively's word for it concerning the big guy's demise. Acute raises the point that Snively's going rogue calls Eggy's own executive skills into question. Acute raises the point that Snively going rogue calls Eggy's own executive skills into question. Eggman's response is basically, "I can hurt you." Remember the comic cover? Well, the truth is that Eggman summoned the Grandmasters to tell them to be on the lookout for the Chaos Emerald that went missing after he screwed up the cosmic continuity. He also chooses the moment to roll out his line of medals. Mecha Sally paired with Metal Sonic, plus Metal Tails, and Metal Knuckles. Eggman then dismisses the Grandmasters, puts Linda in charge, and takes off after Snively in the worst gimmick I've ever seen in this comic, bar none. Yeah, you can definitely tell he's not too pleased about this one either. Alright, now we're going to get into his head, eye, and heart scores. Head score. Hey kids, here's a neat science experiment you could try at home. You'll need one cardboard tube from a rollout of paper towels, one 12-inch ruler, either wooden or plastic, one roll of duct tape. Use the duct tape, the ruler. Use the duct tape. Using the duct tape, okay, you're gonna like this. You're gonna like this. Using the duct tape, tape the ruler to one end of the cardboard tube. Make sure the ruler is flat against the opening of the cardboard tube. Now try flying it like a model airplane. Pretty pathetic, right? Alright. Remember from Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, where the Ministry of Magic suggested that magical folk come up with security questions so they can't be impersonated by Death Eaters? Arthur Winsley's question was, how do Muglo aircraft stay up in the air? The really short answer to that one is lift and acceleration. Lift and acceleration. The Egg Stash Flyer may have solved the acceleration side of the problem, using whatever power source it's using. But it's what's up front that counts against the flyer. The front end is basically a huge flat metal wall. I'm not an engineer, but I think the technical term for this is wind resistance. Add to the fact that there doesn't seem to be any way to maneuver the craft. No wings, no tail, not even any steering thrusters that I could see. What you have here is a tricked out bottle rocket with all the aerodynamics of a pair of eyeglasses falling into a toilet bowl. At least when you watch a Hayao Miyazaki movie with a lot of fantastic aircraft, Narcissus of the Valley of the Wind, Poco Rossose, Lapitude, and Castle in the Sky, those things that at least look like they can fly. The Egg Stash Flyer might look impressive in the emptiness of outer space, but in any kind of atmosphere, it just looks ridiculous. Excuse me. Okay, let's talk about something else. Since this is a comic book, it's no surprise that the story adheres to one of the pillars of popular culture, the necessity of having two comedy sidekicks. From Star Wars C3PO and R2D2 to Lumiere and Cogsworth in Beauty and the Beast to Bebop and Rocksteady in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, you almost can't tell a story without a pair of minions. In the Sonic continuity alone, we've had Scratch and Grounder, and Biko and Deco, as well as Sleet and Dingo, we forgot to mention that. And now Orbot and Cubot have joined the fraternity. Their comedic skills are about what you expect, though it's the chicken-fried Cubot who does more heavy lifting than Orbot. It's pretty obvious who's the straight man here. And once again, we learned that in writing comic books, the quickest way to give someone character development is to endow them with a cheesy accent, in this case, processed American. Excuse me. It's surprising how many villains this continuity has spawned over the years, especially when you get them all in the same room. They're a pretty mixed bag. I don't expect some of them, like Akulut and the Foreman, to show up again. And they really serve no purpose here except to be ordered to appear, sit in on an Eggman rant, and then get summarily dismissed. If it weren't for Snively's already having sent them an email stating that Robotnik had bit the big one, he could have done this electronically as well. Oh, I forgot, there's more at the bottom. That's my... Okay, alright. Which brings us to Snively. This has been a long time coming. Unfortunately, it's also been done. It wasn't that long ago, about 3 years, real time, since Snively greased the way for the Iron Dominion to waltz in and take things over during Eggy's episode. And after that fell through, Snively was back in the fold, if only because Robotnik believes in keeping his friends close and his enemies closer. But Snively can only take so much abuse until the cycle repeats. Snively makes a good foil, the eternal second in command who will never get a shot. But really, there has to be a limit as to how many heel face turns a character can do before editorial says, enough already, and kills off the character because he's simply run out of gas. I'm afraid that's what's going to happen to Fiona. She's turned more than once, and if editorial is determined to dial up Scourge's badness, putting Fiona in Scourge's crosshairs works just fine. I seem to have gone off on a Scourge tangent there. It's understandable, since none of the villains who showed up in this story are anywhere near as interesting. Where a villain does have a somewhat interesting backstory, Baron Beauregard and his relations with Bunny, conquering Storm and whatever's happening in the Dragon Kingdom. It's not on Ian's agenda, so they're swept off stage after serving as an audience. Actually, they serve more as props in an Eggman story than villains in their own right. This story added its page budget. As noted above, we got 4 pages of reintroductions to the secondary villains in this book, and the introduction of the medals was little more than a tease. The space could have just easily been devoted to Snively blabbering less and using more pages to make good his escape while cutting back on the exploitation. It could have been a more exciting sequence. Though Jamal would have had to do most of the heavy lifting. What we're left with is a setup that lives up to the series title. Eggman and the minor villains scramble to fill the pages with the setup for this arc. Head score 6. Alright. I score. Great work by Jamal Peppers, especially when staging the scene in the conference room where Eggman is moving among his guests. And the comedy relief bots are doing their thing. I score 10. Alright, heart score. I know that in the comic book industry, villains have become, if not beloved, then at least major players in their own realms. But this gathering of baddies made me realize that I simply don't give a damn about any of them. I even found myself wondering more about Matilda Armadillo and her chances of reuniting with her brother Mighty than about the Baron. Part of it may be the fact that in the Marvel and DC books, the villains have more personality. There, I said it. Even Conquering Storm, the only villain aside from Linda to get anything like major ink in this book in the past few years, doesn't exactly stand off the page. They're bad guys who look like bad guys, and have maybe 1 or 2 character traits to their names, and that's all. There's really nobody here with any kind of breakout potential on the order of say a Harley Quinn or a Solomon Grundy. Not to put too fine a point on it, it's not like we care about any of these people. And it's the job of the writer to make us care. Not to simply move characters onto and off of this page and hope for the best. Heart score 3. So 16 and 3. So 6, 10, and that 19 score. 19 out of 25. 18 out of this. So you'd be looking at, like, say, for both of them, maybe about 37 out of 50 on both issues between March and April. Again, I will provide the link down below for both reviews. But this is a guy, again, like I said, has a lot of respect. People respect Dan Drazen and his opinions. He's been doing reviews for a long time, almost since the beginning of the comic. He's been doing reviews for Universe, for the Knuckles comics. He's been doing reviews of the super specials and other 48-page specials and whatnot, and even Sonic X. So definitely check out his reviews. I'll provide a link to all the reviews if you want to check them out as well. But again, this is a guy that's friends on Facebook with Ian Flynn. So for him to give a total on both issues, in my opinion, of a 37 out of 50 or whatever, that's not too big. That's not too good of a score. You know what I'm saying? I mean, 18 out of 25 and 19, not good. You know, I mean, if you get into the 20s, that's fine, and everything, but that's not too good right there. I mean, when you read his scoring for like the heart and the head, those are the main objectives. The art score has obviously been good because you got Steven and Jamal going at it with the art. But the heart score, the heart of the story, the head of the story, that's supposed to be pulling you in, grabbing your attention, but and making you care about what's going on. But when you give a score like he did, that's not too good. So again, I'll provide the links to both reviews and the overall reviews of all the issues he's done. Comment down below if you like, and I will talk to y'all later. Y'all have a good day.